How would you describe yourself?
Oh, if I'm being honest, the thing that comes to me, and it sounds a bit sort of self-indulgent, but I guess awakened is kind of my word. I feel a bit guilty saying that because you can sound a bit patronising, but I feel like a very different man now.
I was going to say you haven't always felt
No,
awakened,
no,
have you?
no, no, and that's I think why I say it, because I know what not awakened is, or whatever the opposite is. Yeah. So I just feel, much more in touch with myself, a much more emotional, kind of more balanced, rounded man.
So, when did this transition come about?
8 years ago, so I'm 38. So it started then. It started actually in this flat when I lived with a professional rugby player, and he had an injury, and he worked with a coach, a hypnotherapist and a life coach, and I was experiencing challenges around sex that meant at the age of 30 I was kind of thinking, like this is actually kind of, for a while it was a bit of a laugh, my 20s I always struggled to orgasm, and it was kind of, my friends would kind of call it a gift, they go, God, I've got the opposite problem, and it was kind of a bit of a joke. But at 30 I was like, do you know what, I want to have a family at some point, and I want to have a sexually fulfilling relationship, and was kind of opening my eyes to thinking I want to change this. And then living with Ollie, the rugby player who worked with his coach around an injury, suddenly I thought, is there a possibility for me to work on this? If he's got an injury, have I got an injury? Can she help me? So I'd almost kind of take the piss a little bit initially, kind of like, how are you going to fix Ollie? And sort of listen to what she said, and some of it made sense. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of life that way. Yeah. Just general kind of lifestyle mindset things. And I think that my first sort of vulnerable act, really, or conscious vulnerable act, was sitting down with her and saying, I know you're working with Ollie around this injury, and I wonder if I might be able to mention something to you. Now, she could probably feel it coming. She could probably feel my inquisition. I was asking these questions, and she's like, "What's he gonna say? Everyone's got a challenge somewhere." And so I said this to her, and can you help? And she said, "Yeah, for sure." So I started working with her, and from that moment, she just rewired the way I thought and the way I behaved.
How nerve-wracking was it to say it out loud to someone?
Do you know, I'd always said it. I was very comfortable in sharing it. I sort of owned it always, and I would speak about it. But the thought of trying to transition from it or actually trying to dig into what it was about was I guess the more scary part. I was like, what am I going to have to do? Because I'm quite comfortable in my little bubble, staying safe.
Tell me to F off
at
any point
it's
as
open.
well.
No,
but how did it manifest? What were the sexual problems?
So fundamentally, I just didn't feel much. I just didn't experience that. Well, fundamentally, the orgasm part was what was missing, but I just didn't really feel. So, and with all the work I've done, it seems obvious now, but like I had numbed out my emotions, full stop.
But you were able to have sex.
I was able to have sex. Everything was normal. And sometimes, occasionally, it would happen. It wasn't like I was incapable.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it was something that just didn't really happen. Okay. And so.
From when?
From the first time I had sex at 18.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so that was kind of how it was. And the way I viewed it was that, look, there's, for every man who it happens very quickly, there's got to be someone who's at the other end of the spectrum, right? It's just, and I'm that man. And I just kind of put it down to nature and natural. But it was only when I started digging in and learning about myself, I was like, oh, actually, a lot of these things probably tie into the fact that I struggle to feel. I struggle to experience this sense of, fundamentally, it's a sense of ecstasy. What an orgasm is, it's this release of pure energy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't experience anything. I'd numb myself to all emotions, good, bad, whatever.
Why?
Because a few reasons, but that's what I saw in society to be a man. I was the youngest of 3 boys. I had 2 older brothers, and who I idolised, and what I saw from them and what I saw in society was masculinity was strength and toughness. And my dad was a very, very kind and compassionate man, but he wasn't emotional. He didn't show emotions. He didn't feel. He didn't express love openly like that. And nor did my brothers, and nor did, Terminator or Rocky or, that. I guess there was an element of emotion in them, but fundamentally the men that I saw in society were painting me this picture. You've got to be strong, tough. And with that, unemotional. Don't feel. And if you do feel, don't express it. Don't let people see it. Don't be kind. Even don't tell your mum you love her. Don't do any of this stuff.
It's not cool.
It's not cool. I always say it's cooler to be the bully than it was to be bullied. And that was what, so I don't like saying it, but I guess that's what I was aspiring to be. I wanted to be the cool kid.
But that you must be one alongside millions of others, because the transition doesn't seem to have been until fairly recently that men have started opening up a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. It feels like it's coming alive, isn't it? And I think social media's got a lot of negatives, but it also distributes a message that needs to be heard. And I think suicides in this country, that's gone round the social. Everyone's suddenly seen that 3 out of 4 are men. It's like, what's going on? And that's uncovered all this. Right, we need to look into masculinity and everything. And suddenly this thing has come alive. And even I think now the most alpha masculine of men understand that mental health is a real thing, and personal development is a real thing, and emotions are real things, and we can't just bury all this stuff anymore.
There's a really good study by Mind Lab saying that that men are significantly more sensitive than women, and always have been, but they've just spent their entire, from history to now, learning that that's not okay, that you have to squash that, and you have to be the caveman, you have to be the protector, and all of this pressure, you have to be that person, you're not allowed to be. But yet, actually, ultimately, they're more sensitive.
I'd love to read that.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that. My mum's a nurse, and she was very kind and sensitive and loving. And I loved that in her. I loved that emotion. And I definitely, at my core, was burying who I was meant to be, because I didn't think that was rewarded in society. But there was a sensitive young boy in there all the time, all the way.
Had your brothers ever suffered? Did they open up to you about anything like that?
No, and they're still in that kind of more stoic space. If I'm honest, they don't really share emotions. We don't have these kind of conversations, and they're on a different path, and I get that. If it wasn't for my experience around sex, I probably wouldn't have changed either. I would have kept going. And Tony Robbins always says, the pain of we only change when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. Yeah. And they haven't had that pain of that I had around sex.
Yeah.
So where is the instigation to change, or the obligation, or the desire?
What were the steps that you had to go through then to make these changes?
Vulnerability was the key part. Fundamentally, I had to learn to be vulnerable, to embrace who I really was, and risk judgment of other people, and kind of embrace that I was a sensitive, kind, loving man, and that's okay, and that society wouldn't. If parts of society did judge me for that, that's fine. It's better to live in accordance with who I really am than to, put on that mask and be who I thought society wanted me to be. And so that was, in my language now as a coach, fundamentally I was stripping all the stories that my ego had told me to stay safe, and returning into my heart, which is my truth, reconnecting with that energy of who I really am. And that's the work that I do really now as a coach. It's taking people out of their head and into their heart. And I think that's a journey that a lot of men are yet to go on. Being
vulnerable can be very, very scary, but almost exactly what you just said. The moment people start asking people for help, there's an awful lot of help that can be given by people. And actually, the human nature, we really like to help people. It makes us feel needed on the other side. So it's almost like a gain. But to be that person saying, I could really do with your help, is terrifying. And yet people don't realise that the person hearing that goes, oh, I can be that person for you. It's such a nice thing for people to do and to help each other. And yet, we're too scared to do that. I think we've disconnected from a lot of those emotions, and we've disconnected from kindness fundamentally. And kindness, there's a scientist called Dr. David Hamilton who's written books all about kindness. The Science of Kindness or something. Does he do? That's not. He's written 10 books on all around different kinds of kindness. Yeah, and
he talks about actually what goes on within our body scientifically, the reactions we have when we are kind, and how healthy it is for us, and how fundamentally kindness is the opposite of stress, what it does to our body. So stress is known to be is a killer, really, actually, of us. But kindness does the opposite, and how it actually makes us feel internally. And he also talks about the ripple effect of kindness. If you're kind to one person, then how they go out and they spread that kindness to other people because they felt your kindness, and then that goes to other people, and there's this huge ripple. And he said one act of kindness, according to research, will reach 125 other people through the web that you've cast. And I hope that in society we're returning back to that space now. We're understanding that as men, it's not unmasculine to be kind. It's not weak. It's not. It's actually healthy. It's good, and to be able to sit and help people, and to be able to share openly, and to be able to see each other at a deeper level, not see the masks, not see who you should be, but actually see your real truth, is a beautiful and treasured space.
You, alongside Matt, have a podcast called The Naked Professors, and at the start of each episode you check in.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It's my favourite part of the podcast, actually. Each time we get these really interesting people on, and they've got amazing stories. But I'm just most interested at the very beginning how they actually feel. So we both Matt and I have done these men's retreats where you check in and you say 3 emotions that you're feeling, and you can elaborate a little bit on them. So that before we start, we haven't said a word to our guest. It's like, right, let's check in. 3 emotions that we're experiencing, and it just leads to this really beautiful conversation straight away, authentically, because you get to see their truth. They're not, you're seeing them at a deeper level. Emotions are deeper, right? And I get to instantly see this person, and it's about them. It's not about what they've done and everything else. It's about how they feel, and that's where connection exists. And so, like, it really leads to this beautiful, authentic space of connection. And I know you've met Michael Maisie. One of my most favourite moments on any of the podcasts is when Michael checked in at the very beginning and told Matt that he was a bit triggered by him. He felt quite challenged right there. Because, and I was a bit like, holy shit. I don't know how Matt's going to react to this, because 2 men kind of who'd looked, 2 handsome, charming men, the kind of who are used to being that character, kind of looking at each other up and down, and they hadn't met, and I knew both of them. And it was like, shit, where's this going to go? And actually Michael shared that, and then Matt replied and said, like, I hear you, and I kind of feel the same, if I'm honest. And they both explained why. And Michael said that in his childhood, Matt was the kind of man who would have triggered him, kind of this handsome, charming guy, and then Matt said, he's always intimidated by people who've done all this work and feel very put together and might see him kind of deeper than he's seen himself, or that kind of thing. And they both shared this with each other, and it knocked this wall down. Yeah. And if we hadn't done it, they would have been sounding each other out all the way through. As it was, they just removed this wall, and we had this like such beautiful, authentic conversation as a result, because we all got to see each other.
Do you do that in day-to-day life with people then?
I'm not sure.
Alexa?
I'm really sorry. What's she doing?
What are you not sure about?
Can we edit that out, or is it staying in?
No, let's keep it in.
Okay. Let's hope that Alexa behaves herself. I do. That's what I really want to do.
Yeah.
I still feel in society a little bit, it's people like, what? Like,
we just say, hi, how are you?
Exactly.
Without even, that's not the question to ask.
Totally. Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Or like, and that's a cliche, but it's almost like, the cliche is almost asked twice now. It's like, how are you? They go, I'm good, thanks. And really, how are you?
Yeah.
Oh, tired.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's like, okay, thank you. Now I'm sort of getting to, I get it. Mm-hmm. But I think that comes from, we're scared of, there's this sentiment in society that we're always meant to be positive. We're always meant to bring the energy, the positivity, and it's like, if I tell them how I feel, I'm not, like, they're not going to want to talk to me. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be the Debbie Downer. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to switch that and say, look, we don't feel, you don't need to be, you're not asking for sympathy, you're just owning how you feel, and that's okay. All emotions are fine. So, how you doing? Yeah, do you know what? I slept like shit last night, and I've got a real headache and a massive busy day, and I feel a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing, if I'm totally honest. That's my truth. Like, it's not how I feel today. I feel actually good, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's life. Sometimes we have these, and just owning it, and then being, oh shit, I'm sorry to hear that. Anything I can do to help, and not going, oh my god, like, that's a bit weird. Like, what are you telling me that for?
I don't need to know your shit.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's so true. And also something about vocalizing it yourself almost gives you a bit of a, okay, so that is where I'm at. Well, that's okay. I've just labelled those things. That's fine. I didn't feel it, but I have labelled them, and they're sort of things that maybe I can work on a little bit as well. Maybe I do need to go to bed a little bit earlier tonight, or stuff like that as well, rather than even to ourselves going, I'm fine.
Completely.
Wall.
Which was the first 30 years I lived.
Yeah.
And also recognising that the emotions are temporary. So I might feel like this right now, but that's not me. It's not like how I'm going to be. I'm just letting you know right now that's what I'm experiencing. And maybe in an hour I'll be completely different. You know, I might get a phone call that completely changes it either way at any second. But right now this is where I'm at.
We're so good at, I always liken it to the weather, because we know, especially in the UK, that it rains, and that if it's really glorious sunshine for a day, we know that it's likely to rain the next day, or at least it's not going to last. And we don't, so we see that, but also when it rains, we kind of know that that's also not going to last forever. However, when it comes to our feelings, if we're really unhappy or really angry or any of those emotions, when you're in it, you feel like it is never going to stop. And yet, when we're really happy, we know that that might not last forever. We don't see it as I'm really happy today. Oh, that's it. I'm going to be happy forever.
Totally.
We don't. No. Yet why can't we do the same thing with our negative days? And like you said about that, that you might have a phone call that will completely switch it. The amount of times, you know, particularly when I was in a darker place, if you like, I'd wake up and at like 10 o'clock I'd feel like the day was going to be really difficult, but I'd always get to the end of my day. And so come 8 o'clock I'd think, God, you know, sort of 12 hours ago I thought that today was going to be really hard, and I've got to the end of it and it was okay.
Yeah.
And that's another day done, isn't it?
Yeah, tomorrow's a new one.
Yeah.
And that's okay, totally. I think it's really valuable what you say there about how we sit in that space of struggle, thinking, oh my God. I do think that comes from fundamentally us being scared of judged of saying something negative. You know, I'm not meant to be. Society says I'm meant to be happy, and everyone's, particularly now social media, everyone's happy, having this great life all the time, which is not true. You know, if we were happy all the time, we just adjust the goalposts and our expectations get higher, and actually what we need to be happy are now more. You know, that's kind of how we, if we live in that space, the reality is, I think we've got to live in the present moment, try and drive ourselves forward and embrace every emotion that comes our way, and understand that that's life, that's the reality. And we don't need sympathy, we don't need to be a victim in that way when the bad things happen. That's just how it is right now. I love the analogy of comparing ourselves to dogs, because dogs feel everything, right? But they feel it So from a physiological perspective, emotions should only last about 90 seconds in our body, roughly. Yeah. And what extends emotions is how we think about them. So you look at a dog who doesn't have the sophisticated ego that we do, that processes all these thoughts. It feels every emotion. So when we walk out the door, the dog is so sad. It's like absolutely desperate, scratching at the door. It's awful. It's heartbroken for about 90 seconds. And if you've got a little video in your room of videoing your dog, and then it will go and sit on the sofa and get on with his day and do it. And it's not thinking, where's she gone, or what, like, does she not love me? Is she going to see another dog? Like, what's going on? Like, processing all these things that would just extend all this pain. It's just gone, felt the pain, right, crack on with the day. You then walk in the door later on, dog's so happy, so excited to see you, jumping up for whatever, a minute, 90 seconds, and then it's kind of over it and it's kind of just getting on with its day. Yeah. It just feels the emotions because it's not holding on to them through this processing of the thoughts. Whereas we just hold on to it all and process it all and think about it and dwell and create more and more stories around it all, and you know, feelings are reactions to our thoughts. So if we're creating all these thoughts, we're holding on to all these emotions. And I just find it fascinating. Where can we live in this space where when something's bad, we feel it, and that's okay, but it's not going to last for the day. Yeah. That's what we're feeling, and in the same way when it's good, and continue and play that game and enjoy the journey. And embrace everything that comes in.
Analogy. I love dogs so much as well. Immediately I've got a whole picture going on and I'm thinking about the dogs. In my brain though, you know, when I go and I leave my parents' house and the two amazing cockapoos there. In my brain, they spend the whole week looking forward to me coming back.
Of course.
So don't change that. You know, when I pop in later, they're going to be like, oh, finally, Al's back.
I'm sure they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. They're thinking of you right now.
Thank you.
Wondering where you are.
Yeah.
But you know what? If they did do that, then they'd also hold on to all that pain when you go as well.
I know.
You know, and you don't want that side. So,
no.
You know, I think they've got it right. They just embrace, they feel it, what they feel, and they don't think about it otherwise.
When what made you become a life coach as well? Because it's one thing going through the journey yourself, isn't it? And another thing thinking, okay, now I'm going to train myself.
I mean, I was as shut off to all this stuff as anybody. Really, I really think it's anybody out there. It just was not my bag. And if someone spoke to me about it, it wasn't rude, but I was just like, just not my thing. So for me to then go through the transition I have, and I think it's a shock for a lot of people, I was like, if I can change, if I can go on this, then anyone can. Yeah. And I feel pretty equipped to do that now, having gone through this process. So I qualified to become a coach initially a long time ago, 7 years ago. So soon after I started working with the coach, and soon after I started noticing changes. And then I was working in a tech company at the time, so I used it as a management tool to help me be a better person and continued on my own growth. And did little bits of coaching here and there, but it wasn't my full-time thing. Mm-hmm. But I did have a passion for it. It was my real passion. But then when the struggles came in with the tech company and I felt very reliant on other people, I kind of tried to return to my calling. I tried to return, what do I really want to be here? What is in my control? And it was like, you don't need anyone to help other people. You've been on this coaching journey, you've been on this experience, you can step into that space now. And the liberation of it for me was the fact I didn't need anyone else. I didn't need the tech team that I did for my tech company. This was just my journey and I could do it. So it was something I dipped my toes in more and more and more, and then each day I did it, it just was like, this is my truth, this is my calling, this is what I'm meant to do. And my tech company kind of faded away and each day, and until it became my full-time thing pretty quick. And this is what I was born to do, I think.
And so you're working as a life coach, and tell us some other things that you've been covering over the last few years.
Yeah, I guess I didn't start out for this to be about masculinity, for my message to be predominantly sort of geared or aimed towards men and the whole concept of masculinity and why men behave like they do. But having been on the journey I have, and then with the whole masculinity thing blowing up and being one of the men who is prepared to be vulnerable, to speak openly and share from my heart, if you like, I've kind of been pulled in those directions, and people say, "Oh, Ben, can you come and speak about this and this?" And you listen to that, if that's what people are resonating with. So it kind of has become a big part of my work, has been looking at the masculinity and trying to really step into this space of helping men become more of who they're capable of being. So doing workshops and talks. I spoke in a prison last year to a male prison, to inmates, and ran a retreat end of last year, and I'm writing a book, and all sorts. I mean, every day is different, all sorts of things again, but fundamentally, it's all comes from the same place. It's trying to share the information that I've learned, discovered, put in practice and embodied, and try and use that to share with other people to help them make a difference, a positive impact in their life.
When you it's interesting because going back to Michael Maisie again, when he was talking about the importance of having been through his journey when he went into the prison and spoke to people there, that he felt like having his past was quite an important thing for the inmates to be able to say, oh right, you have been through it. How were you faced with that, having not been
with the inmates
in prison?
I didn't ask for any judgment. I showed up and I just shared my story and who I was, and it wouldn't connect with all of them, and it wouldn't resonate with every single one of them in every way, but my job always for myself is just to show up and be me, and people will take what they will from it, and it won't be for everyone, but it will be for some. So that was my philosophy with the guys in the prison. It was actually a really interesting experience, because I always, when I start, in fact, it's an interesting experience for many reasons, but I start in silence at the beginning of my talk to let people see me, to be vulnerable, to embody all the message that I'm about to talk about. And it's vulnerable for both me and them. They're like, this is awkward, and I'm looking at them all, and they're staring, and no one's saying anything, and it's silence. And in the prison, they just completely ignored me and just started shouting at me when I was standing in silence. They were like, get on with it, say something. And it was awkward for many reasons, and I've kind of started almost feeling like I was going into the headmaster role, like I'm not going to start talking until you lot shut up, which was the opposite of what I was trying to create. So from that moment, that allowed me to embrace vulnerability in a different way, and I had to sort of say, guys, I'm standing here in silence because I want you all to see me, and to be vulnerable enough just to stand here and embrace this moment for what it is. And it wasn't working because you guys didn't know that, and you're shouting at me. But I want you to know that's why I was doing this, and that's what this talk is about. And there was silence then in that moment. And this is it. I actually spoke to Michael before I went into prison.
Okay.
And he said, just, and it's a cliche, but just be you, like be vulnerable. Don't try and know it all or claim to be on any kind of level with anyone. Just be vulnerable and open and share who you are. And that's what I did, really. I just stood toe to toe with them and spoke my truth. And they shouted at me about different things, and we had a conversation about it. And we reached a mutual point a lot of the time, in fact all the time really, where we understood each other. And no one was judging each other. And I actually got locked in for an hour at the end of the prison experience because something kicked off in the prison and everything was in lockdown. So I just walking around all the prisoners, speaking with them after the talk. And that was perhaps the most powerful thing of all, because I got to feel them all. I got to see each of them individually. And I saw their hearts. I know they all made mistakes and they've all done things wrong for different reasons. But I believe that everyone's got a heart, and my philosophy is very much hearts see hearts. And when you show someone your heart and they're prepared to show you theirs, that's where connection exists. And I stood up and showed them my heart. I didn't have the same background or history as them in some ways, but I'd had my own challenges. Mm-hmm. And I talked about sex, it's a vulnerable thing. And I hadn't been in prison, but I had my challenges, and we saw each other. And that was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in that respect, to come through that. And when I walked out, I almost felt bulletproof. I thought, put me anywhere, I'll talk in front of anyone. Those guys have just questioned me as hard as I can get, and it was all good. Like, what do you want me to do now? Nothing
can be harder than
not much.
I imagine.
We'll see.
But funny that you talk about, because I was going to do questions later, but I had a question in from a very good friend of mine, Matt, who saw you at Wilderness last year. And he said that you started your session being silent for a minute, just absorbing the room, and then admitted that you felt nervous. Was that a nerve-wracking thing? And what do you feel in those moments? Yeah,
totally. I love that question. And thanks, Matt. I do. I really do, but I'm trying to embrace those nerves. It's almost like I don't want to put a mask on and pretend I'm not nervous, and people won't see me. I want to let people in when I talk, really see the depths of me. That's where connection exists. And if I'm just speaking like a robot and programming out all this information about stuff, it's there's no connection there. And that's what I'm trying to create. The connection is a huge part of my message. When you let yourself really be seen, it's not. Yes, it's vulnerable, but it's so important, because this is where beautiful things exist. And wearing a mask and protecting myself and pretending I'm not nervous, or just cracking on and firing out this information at everyone, would be easier in that respect, but it wouldn't get the same engagement. It's not the same level of emotion of capturing people's hearts in that space. So I always aim. I start every talk in silence, and it's hard, and I'd much rather I can just crack on and go, hey guys, like, how are we doing today? And just sort of jump into it. And then I also start with how I'm feeling. And usually that's virtually every time it's nervous, because it is. Public speaking is a vulnerable thing to do. I'm nervous, but in owning that, almost asking myself the question and being able to share, that's liberating in itself. It's like, you can see I'm nervous. I've already admitted that. Like, what else? Like, let's all be real in this space. I'm nervous and I'm scared, and I don't know how this is going to go. But what I do know is I'm going to show up and let you see me, and we'll go from there.
There's something, as having been an audience member at those sorts of chats as well, while you don't necessarily feel nervous as an audience member, you feel there's an anticipation, there's a something, isn't there, as well? You're not totally confident going into it as an audience member either, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so it is such, and in fact that's what Matt said. He said that your honesty was a real leveler and helped everyone to feel engaged in the moment, and he found it really powerful. Which is exactly right, isn't it?
I hope that's what I'm trying to create.
Yeah.
And a leveler as well. Like, we're all in this together, and no one's better than anyone else. We're all just humans who have all made mistakes along this path, and, you know, let's just do our best.
And that's a bit like what you said that Matt felt with Michael, that he was almost a little bit vulnerable, that Michael may have gone through more of a journey than him, or come out the other side more, or it's the same thing, isn't it?
Same.
That's the same exchange. Is actually, you know, all I'm doing is passing on my own feelings and thought processes of what I've learned. Do you feel like it's I mean, I know the answer to this really, but this is an ongoing process? Yeah,
absolutely. It's never complete, and I think that's the exciting part. Is I'm here today, but I'm excited for what I'm going to be next year. It's only, you know, and that for me is one of the beautiful things about having a growth mindset, rather than just sort of my attitude in the first 30 years, which is I am what I am, so I better just get on with it and try and make the best of it. It's like I'm not going to change. You know, I thought I was fundamentally, you know, a kind of shy at root, insecure guy, really, who just seeked validation. I didn't understand everything about it, but that was what I was experiencing. I didn't know I could change. And now I'm on this journey, and like you say, it never ends. It's like I'm only this is just the beginning. And in a relationship, you know, I hope for the same kind of thing, where yes, you're in love today, but we're only going deeper. We're only learning more. There's only more growth here, and we're in love now, but we can be even more in love tomorrow and next year, and who knows where we can go with this. Whereas the relationships I had in my 20s were like stationary, and we held hands and it was pretty, but we didn't really know each other. And they wanted to. It was my fault. I'm not blaming anyone else, but the energy, the excitement ran out because there was no growth. There was no more.
Stagnant.
We crave, I think our hearts crave growth of being more. And I don't mean that from an egotistical perspective, that we want more and we want more money and we want more of this. Growth is a very different thing, becoming more of we've all got infinite potential. And stepping more into that space is an exciting one, and who knows what the future holds from
Most definitely. And as a couple, it's really exciting if you're both open to it evolving and learning more about each other and conversing more and being more vulnerable. It's really exciting, but it's switching that mindset, isn't it? To say, okay, this could be a really fun journey that we could do together.
Totally.
Rather than this is terrifying and I don't want to go there, and why can't we just have this relationship because this is fine?
And don't change me.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things, that people just love me unconditionally. Just like I'm gonna just and it's like I will, but if we can grow together, then who knows what's like, this can grow deeper, this can be more, and that's exciting. Whereas the opposite is, no, don't try and change me, let's just stay, okay, accept both of us how we are, which I get is a healthy thing, and that's part of it as well, accepting everyone we're all doing our best. But if we just stay there and we just have no aspiration for going deeper within each other, there's not gonna be any more to this, and our ego is gonna crave lust and new experiences and instant gratification elsewhere, which is not healthy. I've been there as well. It's not a nice place to live.
No, not at all.
No.
Because I've started, I keep jumping all over the place, but seeing as
I'm loving all of it, by the way. It's lovely to have this conversation with you.
It's so good, isn't it? So Matt might as well carry on with his questions. He actually really wants to meet you at some point.
Will he be at Wilderness again?
Yeah, he will be.
I'll see him there.
You definitely really made a big impact on him.
Oh, wow.
And he also asked, what's the scariest thing you've done to make yourself vulnerable? And was that the most rewarding?
Yeah, absolutely. So what comes to me immediately in that is one of the early personal development courses I did. And I made a sort of intention to myself that I was going to show up in that, and however uncomfortable it felt, I was going to embrace it for all it was worth. And that meant sharing what was within me. So if I felt I needed to say something, I was going to say it, whether it was right or wrong or whatever. I was going to show up to this thing. And I went to this place, and there's 300 people sharing all sorts of different sort of depths of experiences and challenges that they'd had. And it was absolutely petrifying, but put my hand up and getting onto the microphone in front of everyone and saying a little bit about myself. And I did an exercise in front of everyone, and the guy said I was dead inside, and which I was really at that point in the very early stages. And it was fun, but that was out of way out of my comfort zone. Much easier to sit in the seat and watch other people do it. They said, don't sit in the crowd and watch people play. Get on the field and play the game. So I was getting on the field and I was sharing what was within me. And the feeling when I sat back down is like, so many things, like, lighter. I feel like lighter, but also kind of proud that I've grown. I've gone out of my comfort. I've just done that. I didn't think I would do that. All these different really positive, deep emotions that in the moment I didn't, before I did it, I didn't want it. It's easier, much easier to sit in the crowd. That's the easy life. But getting in and getting onto the pitch feels uncomfortable, but that is where life comes alive. And I really took that with me. From now on, it's like, do you know what? I'm going to show up as much as I possibly can and just dive into these experiences. People judge me, they judge me. I want my relationship myself to be a good one, and I know for that to happen, I've got to do this stuff. And so the start, really, to answer this question, the vulnerable acts of getting up initially and talking. I guess I really should mention, I went on ITV on this morning and talked about my whole challenge around sex, but I didn't know I was going to talk about that. I thought I was talking about my blog, and then I turned up and it was live, and the TV show introduced itself, and it said, on today's show we've got Joe Blogs talking about shopping or whatever, and we've got the man who can't orgasm. And I remember live, and I remember just, my mum and dad were watching it. My mum knew, my dad had no idea. I remember just thinking, oh my God. And like, there's no backing out. I'm about to get called up to talk about this. Jeez, it's already been introduced.
Sneaky.
So that was a really vulnerable moment, and I had two choices there: absolutely freaking out, or just sitting in the space and saying, hey, do you know what? I mean, the wording's not strictly true, but sit in this space and go and sit upstairs on a sofa with two people, and we're going to have a cup of tea, and we're going to talk, and they're going to ask me questions, and I'm going to answer the truth. However they come out. I don't need to think about this or script about it. And just remember walking out, not looking at any of the cameras or like seeing, like letting my ego create stories of anything, but I was just going to have a cup of tea with two people it was with Eamon Holmes and Ruth. Just sitting there, having that conversation. And that was another really vulnerable act, inside, as petrified, but try not to connect with those thoughts. Try and just be present right here. What am I doing? I'm having a chat with two people on the sofa, and that's it. And they're going to ask me some questions, and I'm going to tell them my truth. And it's a very liberating way. It's scary. It's hugely scary, and it is vulnerable. But where this all comes from is that I believe, and I know that my heart, this energy inside of me, this truth, is always kind and compassionate. It's always coming from a good place. So I might say things wrong. I might get it slightly wrong in how I explain it, whatever. But it's always coming from a good place, and I'll always, if I say it wrong, I'll be able to apologise. I'll be able to own it. I didn't mean that in a bad way. It's how it came out. And be able to apologise and know my truth. And our heart can apologise. It's only our ego doesn't want to apologise. Our ego's scared of judgment and admitting we're wrong and all that stuff. But my heart is not afraid of that. So if I can just keep living in my heart, keep showing up, it's liberating. It's freedom. Yeah. And from there, that gets taken away so much of the pressures of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it makes you feel much happier. Like, people think that the opposite of happiness is sadness, and it's 100% not. The opposite of happiness is fear and scared. That person, because that feeling of once you just give it a go and see, and that lightness that you're feeling as a result makes you start to appreciate, then you start feeling the happy inside you, I think. Yeah,
alive.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's like shit's happening here. Yeah, it's scary, but I feel happy, I feel alive.
Do you think that it's, because I definitely I sort of remember that almost on my 30th, I'd always been quite cocksure of myself, confident. I think that was a sphere of vulnerability growing up, but it came out as being a bit too confident almost. But when I got to my 30s, suddenly I definitely had an overwhelming sense of, actually, do you know what? It's okay if I just own how I'm feeling, and that's okay. And almost picked up a fuck it bucket and just carried that around with me at all times. And if at any point I thought, shouldn't I say this, feel this, do this, I'd be like, do you know what? It doesn't matter. Fuck it. Who cares? And that was like a really useful, like in my brain, it was an actual thing to just chuck whatever it was I was thinking or feeling, being too scared to do or say, put it in there, then it's fine, it's done. But I don't think I could have quite had that confidence in my 20s, I don't think.
I hear you. It does take work, doesn't it? It's not as simple as, you can't just, you have to understand the whole process behind it all, and understand. For me, a big part of all that came from just understanding my ego and understanding where my ego was coming from and why it was behaving how it was. Because then I knew when those fears were coming in, I was like, it's just your ego trying to keep you safe, Ben. It's bullshit. It's not your truth. Your truth is that you like the prison. The truth is I want to be there and make an impact. The ego's stories are, shit, this is scary. And that's bullshit, whatever. Like, fuck that. I'm going in with this passion to make an impact. That's how I'm showing up. So, and I totally hear you, but I had no comprehension of that in my 20s. No one ever mentioned, I hardly heard the word mindset or mind really until 30. Like, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea.
No.
So
it's been, the movement in the last few years is incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I really hope, you touched on the fact, I think it's, what did you say, the percentage of male suicide to female suicide is insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you ever come across, there's an amazing guy called Craig who set up a thing called Men Unite, which he was doing silly amounts of drugs each day. He was putting himself into an early grave. He was suicidal. He hit the ultimate rock bottom, and long story short, he created a Facebook group with few mates, literally a handful of mates who he knew that he could speak to, and because he didn't want to speak to anyone else. And within a year, it's grown to thousands of members, and it is men only. Very much we're here to share, we're here to help each other, and he is making waves. And he said that all of the people that are coming to him have been at that rock bottom and just need this some sort of life support in being able to speak to someone else who's been there and understands.
Wow.
And I love it. I just love the fact that he had the courage to. I'll interview him soon and just find out what it was that made him do that instead of, the potential tragedy that could have been. It's
so nice. I think that it's really powerful when it comes from men who are relatable, who can speak the language to the other, to similar kind of men, if you like. If it can come from, like, we always try and interview the alpha men, because if it can come from them, it's like every other man underneath that. Yeah. In terms of that, embracing their alpha masculinity, can go, well, it's not a woo-woo kind of airy-fairy thing. He's pretty, I love people like The Rock. Like, who's this?
And Fury.
And Tyson Fury. Yeah, exactly. All these kind of men who really step up into that, because fundamentally this is where I'm coming from. As men, and the same with women, but as men, we're multi-dimensional creatures. And we are warriors. We have this leadership, natural desire for courage and leadership, and that, as do women as well. But we also have some of the feminine energy, which is kindness and love and compassion and connection. As human beings, we're wired to connect with people. It's like, it's part, but for whatever reason, over time, we've gone all in on just on the traditional masculinity traits, and we're missing these other parts. And I don't care, any alpha man, however tough they are, they've still got a heart. Yeah. And if they're burying that, they're not letting you see it, then there's something missing within them, and they'll experience that, they'll feel that. And quite often, I think they think it's because they just need the better job. They're really ambitious.
Yeah.
We often mistake it for ambition. And I just need more. Or I haven't met the right girl yet. I need a prettier one, or one who's a bit more that, and then I'll feel complete. Or all these kind of things. And it's you're burying parts of you that are naturally within you that you're not connecting with.
Which will then manifest in other ways.
Totally, exactly, all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
You know, and any men like Craig you mentioned who's stepping up into the space and prepared to open it up for other men, I just feel a bit devastated. I haven't seen that. I need to. It's the first thing I'll do is
I'll pass and I'll make sure I put the link in the bottom of this as well.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah.
You had some more questions. A couple of really. So the guy wanted to stay anonymous. He really opened up. He said that I feel crippled with anxiety all of the time. Some days I find it easier to deal with life than others, but generally I just feel so anti myself and so angry at life. I sometimes have suicidal thoughts. I have tried antidepressants, but I hate taking them and prefer not to be on them. I don't want to go to the doctors, but I don't really know where to start. God, that's sad.
It's tough, isn't it?
Really tough.
Well, he's definitely not on his own.
No.
There are a lot of men. There are so many men out there experiencing something similar, but and a lot of men who perhaps aren't experiencing something similar because they just block it all down, and that allows them to cope, but it's blocking out so much of their life and actually not feeling alive as a result. And as a starting place, I mean, I just talking. Once you talk about these things. I know it's a cliche and I know it's like, but just talking about these things actually lets you see it in a different perspective, actually lets it out and lets you actually feel what you're feeling, and so the energy can start to move. You can realise that you won't be judged. You can realise there are other people who feel in a similar space to you. It just can create a snowball effect of actually just starting to release some of this energy. There might be fundamental lifestyle changes, and I'd really recommend Johann Hari's book Lost Connections, which is amazing. It really looks at where depression comes from. Fundamentally, I mean, not just depression, but lifestyle challenges. Why we feel like we do, because Johann Hari says that fundamentally in society we are set up to not feel healthy, not feel like our mental health is not like the path that we're shown. Like, as I said, we're meant to be connected, but we're living in a more and more disconnected way, and we're wearing stronger and stronger masks a lot of the time. So that's a great book. But reading a book can really change someone's life.
Yeah.
It really can, if you can just see things differently. And also then from there, going to events, you meet like-minded men. You might see other men sharing who talk about things that resonate with you, and you can have a conversation. I'm doing attending some, and I'll be running some myself. Some men's sharing groups where just men can come and just talk. There's a guy called Kenny, the Man Whisperer. I'm going to some of his at the moment.
Oh, interesting.
And there's more of them popping up, but going to those spaces, connecting with you only need 2 or 3 people who really see you, who you can connect with. You don't need loads of friends. We don't need to be accepted by everyone. So just starting in this space of understanding, like it sounds like he has, that there are challenges and not burying them, and that's okay, and accepting that, and then being willing to talk about it and connect with like-minded people, understanding more. Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections. Maybe then, if it's feasible, to work with a coach, if it's possible, but attending, there's so many retreats and things like that now that can help if finances are allowing it. There is so much out there now. If you want, and it does require vulnerability, and it does require you to go into your space and look at this hard in the face and stare at it and acknowledge it, and perhaps face judgment from some people. Even last year or 2 years ago, I remember it filtering back to me that some of my friends had said, "Is Ben having a breakdown?" And these things, this is not what he writes there. It's not a breakdown. This is the start of his breakthrough.
Well, the very fact that he's written it is amazing.
Exactly. It's the start, acknowledging it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who aren't at that point where it's just buried.
Yeah.
They're not prepared and it's, whilst it's buried, you've got no chance of moving on from it. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just staying within and eating you up. So that's a great starting point. And I have huge respect for any man, any woman, any person who sits in the space and says, "Do you know what? There's things that I can work on. There's challenges within me, and I'm ready to move on those things now. I don't want them to eat me up anymore because it's hard." But that is the start, and there's all sorts. And I can, if it's helpful, I can drop an email with some ideas around that. I just take the idea of people feeling in that space, and there is help there.
Yeah.
There really is.
It's interesting. There are more, I had no intention of my podcast being male orientated at all. But I'm interviewing a lot more men about mindset and depression than I am about women. I think men are actually more vocal about their journey than some women. I'm not sure why that's, or whether it's just the how it's working out on my own social media and what I'm being shown. I don't know, but I I'm.
You feel that?
Yeah.
I definitely think, from my experience, it was bottled up for so long, 30 years, that once the cork popped, it was, this flow. Whereas I think women generally are a little bit, they talk a little bit more, so perhaps it's not so much energy suddenly is coming out.
That's true, isn't it?
And they're not reaching the depths perhaps so often.
Yeah.
Men are just this kind of fizzed up bottle of champagne, and the cork's been on so tight, you release it and suddenly there's this outpouring. Whereas perhaps with women there's been a bit more of the cork's never been on and it's just constantly been bubbling, but it's not fizzed up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's right. Such a big movement.
But it's great that you're having these conversations, and and you're great at it. It's lovely to share this space with you.
I love it. I love it.
It's connection, right?
Yeah. And I mean, all my life, really all I've wanted to do is just sit and talk to people. I just love interacting and having deep and meaningfuls. Even when I was younger, even my out nights, I'd rather skip the pub bit. I never wanted to go to a club. What I always wanted to do is for people to come back to my flat or someone else's, and I'd be like, who's going to stay up with me?
Yeah.
And if they were up till sort of 6 a.m, still chatting, ultimately we'd almost always, my brother and I would end up, I don't know what this thing was that we used to end up doing. We'd lie on our backs holding candles, listening to Sandveen or something similar, and probably cry.
Yeah.
But I've totally gone on this whole journey all night.
Amazing.
And that was just, that's what I was doing at 18. So I'm glad that,
it's coming alive. It's more recognised now.
Yeah.
I would have frowned upon the idea of deep and meaningfuls in my 20s.
Yeah.
And now,
I think most of my friends, most people I was around did. They were like, oh, for love of
stay up with
God.
her.
Yeah. Someone's got to keep her company. Tag team.
Yeah, totally. But it is coming alive in people now, isn't it? Even some of the men I see coming to some of the spaces that I talk or whatever, you can sense from them they never have deep and meaningful, but when they do it, they're like, oh, thank you. I had a conversation like that for so long.
Yeah.
I think we all crave them as human beings. We're just scared.
Yeah.
Scared of letting ourselves be seen. Scared of going there.
Yeah.
And then we think it's that we're just not that kind of person. But it's just stories that our ego have told us that have led us to feel that way, and then we associate with the feeling.
Yeah.
Thinking it's us. But it's not. It started from just the way we think. And that thinking can, as I say, can come all the way back to the 80s for me, and seeing what masculinity was meant to be like. None of it was me. It was all just the perception of what I saw that created thoughts, that created feelings, and then I thought I was the feelings. And it wasn't. And scraping all that away and reconnecting my heart is that's just the best journey that any of us can ever go on. For me.
Can you go with one more question?
Of course, we can talk all day.
So this is from Mikey.
Yeah.
He said, can you help me break my bad habits? When I'm anxious, I eat too much crap and drink too much alcohol, so I end up putting on weight and then feel even more crap about myself. That's really normal. I would say that lots and lots of people do that and feel like that, don't they?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're seeking comfort, you feel disconnected, you need some kind of win, some kind of high, so you'll give something that gives you some instant gratification, and then you feel better for that moment, and then worse after because you've just not served your deepest value. It's hard. I shared a quote recently that said, make easy decisions, live a hard life. make hard choices, live an easy life. And what fundamentally he's doing is making easy choices, what he feels like he needs in that moment, at the detriment of how he feels later.
Yeah.
Rather than connecting with his deepest value, who do I really want to be, and living in tune with that, and doing things that are hard at times. You know, life isn't easy all the time, but by doing those things that really serve your deepest values, you become prouder of who you are. You become more aligned with who you really want to be. And from there, you don't have to go chasing the instant gratification as much, because you just like who you are. You're kind of content without it. I use the analogy of chasing happiness rather than fulfillment.
Yeah.
And like society teaches us to chase happiness. We're meant to do all these things that make us happy. Oh, like YOLO, or, you know, we only live once. Like, screw it, I'm going to do that.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it's like, well, go and do that, but that's at the detriment of your own relationship with yourself, or kind of the opposite of self-love. And then you'll do shit that you don't want to do. So fundamentally, if we can work on the relationship we have with ourselves by doing things, I always put it, that do things that make you feel proud rather than happy.
Yeah,
rather
that's
than chasing
a nice
happiness.
way of looking at it.
What makes you proud? Like for me, exercise I know is a big part. So doing exercise, I don't want to do it in that moment. It's much easier if I could have an hour, flick the TV on, and lie back on the sofa and sit on Instagram. That feels easy and nice. But then after that, at the end of the day, I look at how I've behaved. I'm not feeling proud or good about myself. When I'm in that disconnected space, I'll then go chasing something to make me feel better.
Yeah.
So can we start doing things that really serve you at deep level, so you build a relationship with yourself that makes you proud from that space of self-love, fundamentally what it will lead to? You'll be able to make healthier choices. I know it sounds simple and trivialized, but that's what it made simple. That's what it comes down to.
Our baseline is happy, you know, like babies don't come out sad.
No.
They come out hungry and those basic needs, but they're fundamentally, once they've been fed and they've slept, they're happy.
Yeah.
And I think it's Mo Gawdat who says that we're a bit like a phone, you know, when the phone very first arrives. And then things start saying, you need this, you need this, you need this. So we start downloading these apps and then wonder why we don't function so well and why we're running on lower battery and, you know, why we're not working as well as we were. And that if you strip yourself down and realise that your baseline is happy. So if you're not feeling very happy, then write a checklist of the things that you feel make you less than happy, and then work that way round. Rather than thinking, I need to do more of this to make me happy, I need to do more of that. Sometimes it's maybe you need to do less of that and less of that, and that needs to be adapted and that needs to be adapted. And that was quite I go, that's a nice way of looking at it.
Just returning to your natural source.
Yeah.
More being, less doing.
Yeah.
Just being yourself. Like I want to start writing stuff about cliches, because fundamentally we're saying be yourself, and I was always like, be yourself. Well, I like in my 20s, I'd be like, well, myself loves going to get drunk and sleeping with many women. Is that what you're telling me to do? Because I do that. It doesn't really seem to be kind of serving me that great. I feel pretty empty.
And if you don't like yourself, then saying be yourself can be like
it's a trigger.
Well, everyone fucking hates me.
Yeah.
I hate myself. That self-loathing.
Yeah.
That's not, you know, it's all chimp brain. It's not true.
Yeah.
But that's who you feel yourself as. So be yourself can be a really scary thing.
Yeah. Unless you can strip away and really get to know. I call it your heart and soul, but however people understand it, your intuition, your gut, whatever it is, that thing, that energy inside of you, that's your truth. That's your raw. That's who you are as a baby. You know, before your ego's kind of developed, the chimp brain, whatever you want to call that's developed and told you who you should be to fit in and stay safe. Returning back to that source, that's yourself.
Yeah.
And but again, who's ever taught us that? Nobody.
Like, I really hope, I know that having now started doing yoga and meditation for children, I love it, and I love the fact that they really want it. And I've even had a school approach me last year saying that the GCSE girls, it's actually the school I went to, but the GCSE girls have been asking for yoga and meditation because they were so stressed about their exams. I love the fact that they were reaching out for that approach rather than anything else. Like when I was doing my GCSEs, I was reaching out for sleeping tablets and Pro Plus to get me through it all. I wouldn't have even thought about meditating. And yet I grew up as a Buddhist. My mum was a Reiki master, you know, like, so I knew it all, but I would never have thought of doing it myself.
No.
And so I really hope that gradually the education system will really see this shift and start it from, you know, nursery.
Totally. Well, how is it in an education system that we're taught about all this stuff, so many different things, and that's kind of great, you know, don't get me wrong, but how is there not space for these basic human lifestyle? How are we going to live? How are you going to choose to live the rest of your life? You're given nothing about it.
No.
But you can know about algebra.
Yeah.
Which I'm still not sure how that fits in with everything.
No, not a clue. We'll spend, you know, maths, yes, great. Apart from the fact it would have been much more useful for me if we'd done accountancy or tax or something like that. That would have been easier.
You need that in life. Yeah. You know? It goes back to this whole thing for me, which, you know, we undervalue the feminine energy. Fundamentally, that we're undervaluing kindness, empathy, connection. We're just looking at the sort of the measurables, the finance side of things, and thinking that all that is the key towards happiness. It's not. It's the key to staying safe, having a kind of functional life with money and a roof over your head. It's not the key to happiness.
No.
It's the feminine energy that we need to embrace for that.
Yeah.
And at school, it's all in on the finance side.
Yeah.
Educate yourself to make money.
Another thing with Mikey saying about bad habits, jumping back, sorry.
Yeah.
Is to make the bad habits harder to do. Because a habit is, you know, like every good or bad habit has a cue and a reward, whether it's negative or positive. So, you know, wine bottle equals fuzzy, happy, sad head, whatever it is, that's your reward. Your slightly inebriated state is your reward. Bottle of wine is you know. And so the trigger is maybe feeling pissed off, open fridge, see wine or beer, rather than see something that's more pleasurable. And I know that, for example, apparently actually our body reacts to fizz, and so if you can replace the wine bottle or the beer or whatever with fizzy water, while it isn't, you know, while we don't go, well, that's not, what's that going to do? Actually, there's something scientific in the fact that it's to do with bubbles and what bubbles do to our body, and give that a go. And don't have things like, you know, people say to me, God, you never snack on crap, and it's like, but that's because the crap isn't in the house. You know, if I put the barrier in, you know, if, like, actually at the moment there's dairy milk, chocolate, but disc jobbies in the cupboard, and yesterday I took a handful. I would never walk down to the shop and buy myself chocolate, ever. But it was in the house. So then my brain goes, what's a handful going to do? You just taught yoga, it's fine.
Totally.
That's you know, if that was in the cupboard every day, that would become a bad habit.
I'm exactly the same.
And so just don't, you know, those sorts of bad habits, if you know that you're going to grab for the beer, then don't have it in the fridge, it's in the shop. So there's a barrier to you. So that breaks your habit, because it means that it makes it harder to do the bad habit. Yeah.
So replacing it with a you know, I guess initially something step by step, you can kind of make it better. I did my simplest example of that is chocolate. So I have 85% dark chocolate in my fridge, and I do get a craving, especially after a meal. It's like I need something, and 85% chocolate, slowly I've adjusted. Now I really like it, and it's a healthy alternative that fixes my craving. But it's not like having a packet of Haribo. You know, or whatever it is.
We sometimes have like really light hot chocolate, and if you have that with hot water, that fixes that craving, and that's actually really not bad in calories at all. Finding that. And another one that I have yet to start doing, but I am going to start doing, is I'm going to stick a sticky note that just says squats beside the toilet. Every time I go to the loo, I'm going to do 10 squats.
Nice.
because someone had said to me that they're doing these, the various challenges that we see on social media, and one of them recently has been like 100 squats a day. I was like, God, that's funny. As a PT brain, I know that if I said to any of my clients, you need to start doing 100 squats a day, they'd be like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
No.
Like, that sounds like a hideous thing.
Yeah.
Sounds like an hour's worth of squatting. No one wants to do that.
No.
And so I was like, right, well, how can we break that down? And I thought, every time you go to the toilet, just do 10 squats.
Yeah.
10 squats is nothing.
Yeah.
And you already, that's a good squat height.
Yeah.
You can do it while you're flushing the loo. That's your 10, that's your timing.
Yeah.
Or you go to the loo at least 10 times a day.
Yeah.
There you go, that's your 100.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you'll be doing 150 squats a day.
Yeah.
And that will feel easy, doable, and that's a really good way of creating a really good habit.
Yeah.
And it's not long before our brain then needs that habit.
Yeah. What do they say, 28 days or something for it to become a habit?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a good, I try and do similar kind of things again, and I need to do more stretching. I'm not flexible. Yoga is a real embarrassing procedure for me, but I try and do it as much as I can. But so when I'm brushing my teeth, that will be the kind of trigger for me every time I brush my teeth, obviously twice a day. So I'll always include stretches around it will start while I brush my teeth, and then I'll finish it off after. And that's something I've introduced, and I know that I'll do it then. But in the middle of the day, I probably wouldn't stop my day and do stretches because I feel like it's a bit of a waste of time. I should be cracking on. But around that, so can you fit little things that benefit you around your, like going to the loo or something? I used to have a little mantra that I wrote out to myself that every time I walked through a door, I'd remind myself to like tuck in my pelvis, stand shoulders back, and stand up tall every time I walk through it, and smile. That was my remember that each time. So when I walk into a room with the right energy. I haven't thought about that for a while, but it reminds me of. I used to write it down. I used to have like a little Bible for myself things I would do.
That's an acting technique as well.
Really?
Yeah, that's a one that we used to use in acting. Is when you step on stage, take an in-breath, because you instinctively, particularly if you're chest breathing, which obviously generally we try and encourage belly breathing because we know it calms you, but in terms of a presence breath, then tends to be a chest breath. And so stepping into a room on an in-breath will automatically lift you and lift your body.
Nice. Yeah.
So what's next for you?
What's next is my big focus, almost my goal for 2020 really is just to get this book written, because I just feel there's so much space right now for men to have a relatable kind of Bible is what I want to create of learning why we behave how we do, and to be able to change it, and to really understand that what that emptiness that we experience within is about. It's not about ambition, like I said before, and just really get that message out in relatable fashion, so that I want to provide something that every man can read that I didn't have when I was 20. So the experiences that I had of emptiness, I could understand that why, because I just feel from there, if I can get that out, then that's just such a big stepping stone for me. There's so much information inside of me that I want to share around this, that is my goal. I've got a group of like an accountability group. There's 4 of us, and we all sat down at the beginning of this year and go through our goals. And I had all these goals, and I started just stripping them off. I was like, no, that's bullshit. It's kind of my ego was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's like, no, Ben, what you've got to do this year is write this amazing book. That's your goal. That's what you've got to do. So, I mean, invariably, loads of things are coming up that you can't say no to. But that is ultimately my goal for this year, is to write an amazing book that I wish I had when I was growing up. So
have you started putting pen to paper?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I have. I've done the first sort of chapter and a half, and I've done loads of notes for the other chapters. So it's all sort of scaled out, but it's just not actually transferred into book form yet. But
will you type it or handwrite?
No, I will type it. Just because I make so many mistakes. If I handwrite it, plus I barely can hardly write anymore.
Handwriting.
Yeah,
honestly.
Oh my
god! And how much paper? Oh my god! Writing anything, my hand's like, Whew, I got a hand ache.
I'm like, that can't. How do you do that bit now? Like, how's that? My signature is all over the shop. I just never do it. It's completely unfamiliar now.
Yeah, and the amount of times I sign and I'm like, I'm so sorry, that's really not my signature.
It is me, I promise. Totally. So I can't. There's no hammer. Leave the handwriting.
Do they do any hand? Yeah, they do handwriting in school a little bit still, don't they?
Do they?
There's definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I can imagine that they don't. I can easily understand that at some point. That it's like, well, when do you write? What do I write? Writing.
Yeah, it's gonna be like extinct, isn't it?
I can imagine. Yeah.
Bring back the writing. I still have a paper diary. I love that.
Yeah. That's really nice. It's important. They do say something. There's something about the psychology of actually writing something on paper is different to typing it on a computer. Yeah. Which I get.
Yeah, definitely.
Book
and the future of the podcast.
Yeah, we just want to, like you, we just want to keep having impactful conversations, real conversations where people share their truth. Yeah. And let other people know that they're not alone, try and educate, try and help, provide bits of information like hopefully we have done today that can help people. For us, a big part of that is getting high profile people who, people perceive as having all their stuff together and trying to strip them down and show that actually whoever you are, you've got challenges and actually, they've experienced deep anxiety, they still do, or life is not complete for them, that we're all in this together. Don't be fooled by what you see. Wherever you're at in life, we're all just on a journey doing our best, and it's not all put together, it's not all perfect.
The assumption when you're in that place that everyone else has it sorted, and it's particularly one of my family members is really struggling, and he just can't. His brain, he cannot comprehend the fact. He's so envious of people around him that he assumes are all fine, and he's crippled with anxiety if they come over and stuff like that, because he thinks that people are assuming this and that the other about him. And most people are more concerned about what they're doing than caring about what other people are doing as well. And it's so rare. Most humans are kind by nature. It's so rare, isn't it, that they think so negatively, and yet his brain, and many people listening will probably feel the same,
Yeah.
That the assumption is that they're going to think X, Y, and Z about you, and that's just... No. And if they do, that's their own... Yeah. It's the mirror being it's that, isn't it? It's completely. Not.
No, it's not. I mean, look, none of us are perfect. So maybe people will see our imperfections, but whatever. And you're perfect, are you? You got everything sorted. Because really, the more work you do, the more you realise that you really haven't, and that no one has. Yeah. And it never ends, like we discussed earlier. So that's liberating in itself. I don't need myself to be perfect. No one is. Yeah. The other thing of this is the imposter syndrome. The more I do this, the more conversations I have. Like, I was at an event with Freddie Flintoff, the cricketer, recently, and who perhaps was one of he's had all sorts of, but amazing, a real leader in that respect. But he talked about when he went out to bat when he was playing cricket for England. He said he used to walk out as if I owned the place. That was my attitude. But inside, I didn't even know if I deserved to be there. And that was one of England's greatest ever cricketers. And you've got footballers now coming out more saying, I never thought I deserved. I couldn't believe it when I was playing for England. I never thought I was that good. And the more you realise, there's a guy, one of my favourite podcasts was a guy called Mark Peart, who won the SAS, or he completed the SAS show last year. Right. He did this amazing talk about how he lost his wife to suicide. And just was incredibly vulnerable in owning it. And that was why he was there. They're going through the challenge, but... which is powerful in itself, but and beautiful, in a really, you really let us see him. Obviously deeply saddening, but he talked about the experience of how he turned up on the show and he almost left the first couple of nights because he never thought he deserved to be there. He didn't think, he's just looking around at everyone else, God, look at them and them. The reality was, behind the scenes, the people running the show, which I know on good authority, they were panicking because he was so clearly the best. Like, he was dominate physically. Like, they were going, how are we going to make this into a show? And he's just bossing this whole thing and making it look kind of... So, you've got... Everyone's having these perceptions, and that... living with the thought of that you're not good enough is not a nice thing to live with. It's on ego's natural way of thinking. I'm just like, do you know what? I'm just going to show up and give it a crack. And yeah, I fully hear that I don't think I'm good enough. I don't deserve to be here, and I might screw it up and whatever. But I'm going to give this a go. And actually, I haven't really failed.
Yeah.
Since I've had that attitude, I haven't really, and I'm sure I will. There are going to be times, maybe it'll be my book, or maybe it'll be whatever. But I'm going to give it a crack.
Yeah.
And that's liberating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I do fail, then, like you said, people aren't they've got their own stuff to deal with. Yeah, fuck it. Everyone's got their own shit to deal with. Yeah. Like the spotlight effect. Psychology talks about spotlight effect, how we think every spotlight is on us, when everyone's thinking that, and everyone's, like you said, is worrying about their own stuff. They're not looking at you.
No.
Like, just do your thing, and accept it's not going to be liked by everyone anyway, and you might fail. No one's probably going to notice. We've all got to crack on.
Yeah.
That's what I think, anyway.
So instead of, because we didn't check in, let's check out.
Nice.
How are you feeling now compared to how you felt this morning? And
I just feel really alive when I have these conversations, fundamentally. I love the fact that we've had this conversation. If I'm honest, like, I didn't know how our energies would match when I initially met, but hearts see hearts.
Yeah.
And everyone is different, and that's fine. If you speak from the heart, then there's a connection there. So I feel really, it's another kind of little example to myself. Just let yourself be seen, and see the person, see their heart. Like, let's not create judgments of who we all are, and place barriers between each other before we get there. Just sit in the space and be yourself. And so I feel it's another lovely lesson for me. I feel really enthused by that because I've loved this conversation with you. And yeah, all of that. I just feel very kind of content and proud of myself as well. I feel proud of the conversation that we've just conducted and sharing, and it was lovely to be part of. So
I would echo everything that you've just said. I came with no expectations. I came with excitement, as I keep doing with all of these conversations. I love meeting new people, especially if they're open and up for chatting. And even if they're not, I'm quite intrigued by that too. So, and I actually, my last question was going to be, do you feel proud of yourself and your journey?
I do. I really do. That's what keeps me, if I have a bad day, which I do invariably, I can always return to that space underneath it all, which is a much more solid foundation. Sadness is temporary. That pride is pretty inked in, pretty deep at the moment. It's going to take a lot for that to be jolted. And so I really do, yeah. And yeah, I'm only getting prouder, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So, do you?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I spin so many plates that I'm trying to work out, and I feel like gradually I'm working out which plate to spin the most. But I'm also really, this year I've gone, do you know what? Just see what happens.
Surrender.
Totally. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you drop them all either. Just let it go, and that is quite a nice feeling.
It's easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
And show up. I think that it's a massive part of living is surrendering to the result, but just agreeing with yourself that you'll show up without fear.
Yeah.
And the path will become clearer.
Yeah.
Like you're doing.
Like, there's nothing. I've always done a lot of everything, bit of a jack of all, tried to master everything, thoroughly enjoyed doing all that, but as a result, not really been and anything in particular. I guess the presenting is what ended up really pulling through. And then since starting to to open up a little bit more anyway about life for myself, and having gone through a few traumas in the last 2 years, that's by nature led me down this other more exploratory path, and combining the presenting with these sorts of conversations. And in the past I used to be concerned about the fact that if I was pushing something that was creative and exploratory, it's not going to make me money, and feeling the pressure of, but you have to pay your bills, so you can't possibly do that. And this year I went, you know what, does that matter? You'll work it out. You're not going to end up on the streets. I'm lucky, you know, I know that I'm safe enough that that won't happen to me. And so go with that and then see. So yeah, so each time I do this and have these sorts of conversations, it reminds me that that's the right path. And I'm lucky enough to meet people like you.
Oh, likewise. It's one of the most beautiful parts of what I do is the people I get to meet.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Yay. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat.